Serious, people of Reddit. What is the one thing that was so disturbing and gruesome you saw in your life that still disturbs you deeply to this day? When I was about 10 or 11, my older sister jumped out of our moving van trying to kill herself while my mom was driving. We were going about 55 and she hit the ground and the back tire ran over her. She somehow survived and has a normal life with her husband now. I don't really talk to her about it that much, but it was an awful experience. While I was stretching at a high school cross-country running race, a guy jumped his bike off the path to take a shortcut down a small hill. His front wheel hit a rock and he was ejected off the bike. He landed on his face and skidded a couple meters along the asphalt, stopping almost directly in front of me. He was motionless for a period and I was too much in shock to help. I wouldn't have known what to do anyway. Someone turned him over and his face was completely gone. I remember hearing that he lost his nose and one eye. What stuck with me was how one's life can change in an instant and the potential gruesome consequences of a single poor decision or miscalculation. Hear a neighbor screaming for help. Go outside like the frick my neighbor's doing now. She's hysterical and I run over and see what's happening. She's nonsensical and leads me to the basement, all the while making this fricking wailing wheezing sound. Her son lay blue-faced on the ground. Paramedics arrived shortly and tried to resuscitate him because his feet were warm to the touch and it would have been fairly recently he had killed himself. He did not make it. Neighbor had found her son in the basement hanging from the recently deceased family dog's leash. She tried to lift him in a futile effort as if he was going to pull himself up or start breathing again. After she tried to do this and realized that she needed to cut him down, she grabbed a knife and cut him down. As she cut him down, she couldn't brace his dead weight and he smashed his head on the way down, and she was very concerned by this. It wasn't the young man's face or circumstances of the death, it was that freaking noise that woman made going down the stairs. Still hear that poop sometimes. Authorities pulling a boy's body out of the ocean and there were 50 crabs all over him holding on to their meal. I saw someone's leg degloved. It was fricked. I was walking to school and someone bailed on their motorbike without proper protection on the road I walked to school in. The silhouetted outline of body parts and pieces of metal and plastic strewn over the road when a family friend was hit head on and killed while driving a motorcycle. I used to copy file notes for inmates and deliver them to the prison when their cases were updated. I had to go through folders for each inmate, often seeing letters from victims, family members begging for their release, and reasons why they were incarcerated. The really bad ones were flagged with sensitive material labels, like the aftermath of abuse photos and worse. Was carrying a particularly large stack of these folders to a parole officer's desk one day. They got away from me and started to shift when I dropped them. One of them spilled photos of child pornography, and I saw way too much of them. It turned my stomach so badly. I had to leave that job. I was about 6 years old and I was playing with my bunny in the yard while my mom was in the garden. A hawk flew down and took my bunny and ate it on the roof of the garage. Saw the smeared remains of a guy who tried to cross a busy highway and was obliterated by an 18-wheeler. Watched my stepdad try to kill himself by hanging himself off the fire escape at our apartment. He told me to tell your mom I said goodnight and he jumped off. Saw a jogger get hit by a car when I was driving with my aunt. She pulled over and ran to help and called 911. And she came back to the car covered in blood. I was like 7. My first trip to Mexico. Saw a guy walking on the side of the road during a storm. Was struck by lightning and my grandpa put him in the bed of the truck to take him to the hospital, but the poor fellow fell dead instantly. I remember I kept looking back and saw and smelled charred flesh. I was only 4 years old. 24 years later. That image still haunts me to this day. Watched a shotgun suicide in 2nd grade. Guy had a domestic dispute with his wife and the cops had him blocked in front of our house. Keep in mind, This was in the late 80s before tasers and poop. Anyway. Dude jumped out of the car and hit himself in the chest with a claw hammer thinking that would do the trick. When he realized it wouldn't, he reached into the backseat and grabbed a shotgun. Stuck it in his mouth and suddenly his head was gone. Nightmares even to this day. I was on the streets after fleeing violence at my family's house. I was in my car behind a Hobby Lobby and I was awoken by crackhead trying to break my driver's side window with their head. They kept smashing their head even once blood was splattering on the window. I fumbled trying to find my keys from the panic and gunned it out of there. I went to a nearby McDonald's and asked for a couple cups of water to rinse off my window and door. I probably looked like a serial killer lol. A toddler getting hit by a car. The little girl took off across the yard headed towards the street and the mom was too far away to catch her before she ran right in front of the car that was in front of us. My dad slammed on the brakes as soon as he saw her running and was screaming no 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 no, but the car in front of us didn't see her. My dad pulled into the driveway across the street from the house and told us not to look out the back window. We could hear the horrific screams from the mom and the driver was absolutely hysterical. We had to stay there until the police arrived and it was just constant screaming. It is never talked about unless one of us, my dad and brothers, have a nightmare about it. I seemed to block it out for years until I became a parent when it started becoming a reoccurring nightmare for the entire pregnancy. Used to work in journalism. Two bad car wrecks come to mind. One was a head-on highway crash involving a van with 8 people in it. They were all trapped when the van caught fire and burned to death. Got there as the bodies were being removed. Didn't see much but the smell. Second was a motorcycle crash. Motorcyclist took a sharp curve at 50 miles per hour and ended up impaled in a chain link fence. Not nearly as gruesome as some of these, but watching my best friend be taken by brain cancer. Over the course of 15 months he lost 100 pounds and turned into a yellowed husk of the healthy 23-year-old he was before. It was a grueling process. Edit. I'm so sorry to see how many others have lost someone to cancer. At the same time, I'm thankful for the chance to bring a little bit of attention to brain cancer awareness. My friend heard from his roommate that he thought their apartment was getting robbed. I go over there with him and the front door is ajar. We try to open it but the door is obstructed by something. So we retreat to the stairwell. Someone comes banging on the door to the stairs. We think it's the intruder. It's not. It's the roommate. Their third roommate was the one obstructing the door. He had wrestled with the burglars and was shot in the head. That freaked me up for a while. I still get PTSD flashbacks when I hear a scream. I think someone's invading my home. Walked in on the nurses getting my dad ready to go down to the morgue when I was 17. I wanted to just spend a few more minutes with him but instead saw my naked, dead dad getting all his tubes yanked. It's been over 20 years and I can see the macabre humor in it. But still. I came home to find my fiancé dead on the living room floor. Had to end up selling the house because every time I came home that's what I saw. 10 years off, happy memories wiped out by one awful one. I wasn't allowed to see him. He died face down and had apparently been there for a couple of hours, so the blood pooled at the lowest points of the body. I was upset at the time but now realize that I wouldn't want that to be in my brain. Almost home. After a long work trip. Came up on a gruesome 3-car wreck on a 2-lane highway. I saw a state trooper covering the body of a 5-year-old. This was about 10 years ago. I've got 2 and they are both from elementary school. The first happened when the cool trend was to shake up a pop can and pierce the lid with a pin then shotgun the coke. One kid went to do it and lost his grip on the pin, which was blasted down his throat by the force of the pop flying out of the can. I remember being amazed by how much blood was pouring out of this kid's mouth. He went to hospital and recovered. The scene shows up in my stressed dreams sometimes. The second was the next year, so I'm in grade 4. The schoolyard was surrounded by a chain link fence. Maybe 5 feet tall. But being the 80s there was no caps on the points at the top. So a frisbee or ball or something got tossed over the fence and an older kid decided he was going to climb the fence to get it. Got to the top and his foot slipped and the fence went through under his eye and popped his eyeball out. Just a shocked kid standing there staring at his own eye still on the fence. No idea what happened to him since he was a few years older, and being a kid I never thought to follow up on it. Gotta imagine he lost the eye at the very least. Still get the heebie-jeebies 20 plus years later when I think of that one. Edit, whoever gave the eyes. I see you. I like you. Watched my brother crack his head open on his wedding night. Somehow fell out of the golf cart and landed on his face. It was just me and the driver on this dark road. I jumped out and ran to him. Unconscious and seizing. Blood everywhere. Took forever for the ambulance to show up. Luckily he regained consciousness and tried to sit up. So in my panicked state after watching him land on his head neck, I spent the entire time holding his neck stiff just in case he broke it. Head wounds bleed like crazy. Apparently. Edit, he's absolutely fine today. I definitely should have mentioned that. I'm a funeral director and I've got two cases I think about a lot. The first was a Russian man who shot himself. He entered the yard in a poncho. Sat on a chair and shot himself in the heart. Russians always do open caskets, so he was preserving his face, but he didn't realize I need an intact heart to embalm. But that's not what sticks with me. When we unwrapped him he had a big fat smile plastered on his face. It was like staring into the void and the void smiling calmly back at you. He was completely at ease with his decision. The second is who I affectionately refer to as Riverman. He had been there for 2 weeks. The smell was indescribable. He was falling apart. Blue, green and black. You can't just convince yourself everything's fine. There's this innate biological response to working with decay like that, and all day my body was in fight or flight mode. His wife insisted on viewing him. We cautioned her. We showed her photos. We asked the medical examiner to caution her, but she could not be dissuaded. She spent 15 freaking minutes in a tiny room alone with him. Over the summer my boyfriend and I were driving somewhere and we witnessed a guy on a motorcycle get run over. He fell off his bike for some reason, we didn't see why, and we saw the woman in the car right behind him run over him. She was honestly riding too close to him. Maybe if she gave him more space she would have had time to stop. We pulled over to call the police. And I remember asking her if she was okay. She was hysterical. Saying I killed him. I killed him. I remember saying we don't know that. The ambulance is on the way. Boyfriend and I left once the police and medics arrived. It was on the nightly news later that day. The man didn't make it. He was mid-20s. Around our age. I just remember him covered in blood and road rash. What a poor way to go. Please give motorcycles plenty of room when driving behind them. Things could have turned out differently if maybe she left more room for reaction time to stop. My friend at work falling out of a 30-foot tower. Landed headfirst. And died in my arms. I was covered in his blood and had a massive mental breakdown after that. Second would be the sight of my own fingers after being degloved at the same factory. Nothing but bone left on my ring and middle fingers up to the first knuckle. Once when I was driving to school I almost got hit by a drunk driver. They were speeding and lost control. Bumped into a semi and flew straight towards my car. I slammed on the brakes and they flew into a steel pole. I watched her head slam into the wheel and then fly back when the airbag went off. I went to help her out of her car and seeing her bruised and bloody upper body was shocking. It made me realize that no matter how many precautions I take, there is always something that's out of my control. When my ex, long distance, girlfriend cut her own neck on video call with me watching with a razor blade, there was nothing I could do but watch and beg her to stop. She had a bad case of schizophrenia, so it was really bad. Saw a video of a guy being tortured by gang members. He had his hands and feet cut off. And the skin on his face was peeled off so you could see every muscle. The gang members then tried using a rusty garden tool to cut his head off. It was too dull, so every time they tried he would just thrash and reach up to grab the dull blade with his stumps. Shit will never leave my brain, unfortunately. When I lived back home, public executions was still a thing. I am unsure if it's still a thing now. My family, being normal people who would not like to see other people die, would always make sure to avoid those areas like the plague when this poop was going down. Unfortunately, one day after an all-nighter at work, I forgot what was happening due to the sheer tiredness and caught a glimpse of it. What made absolutely horrific was the number of people there to watch it. It was so sad to see a crowd so big there at 6 AM on a snowing morning just to watch someone hang from a crane and die. Edit. Just to clarify, the country in question is Iran.
Hi there. Look, if you enjoyed the video, well, why not go ahead and hit that like and subscribe to Reddit Stories. In fact, if you want to see even more responses to this thread, well then, take a look. There's the link in the description below. And remember, show some love to those authors while you're there. And I look forward to seeing you next time.